whakatimata mō te reo. Tūtawa mai rongi, tūtawa mai raro, tūtawa mai roto, tūtawa mai waho, kia tau mai te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa. Haumi e, hui e, kai ki e, kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you very much. So apologies, I don't have apologies for today, and neither do I have declarations of interest. So we move straight to the draft annual plan 2020 to 2021. And I just want to make a couple of comments as we move into the discussion on this. And there are a number of things that I want to say. First of all, I think it's really important that people understand very clearly what the process is that leads into the development of each annual plan and the significance of where it sits in terms of the long-term plan. So every 3 years, the council develops a long-term plan which has a financial strategy with a 10-year outlook and an infrastructure strategy with a 30-year outlook. And within that context, there's a 3-year operational window which sits between two councils. Essentially, it's developed in the context of one council who's been in place for over a year at that point and are able to look at all of the elements going forward. So looking at a 10-year horizon in terms of the financial strategy and a 30-year horizon when we come to the infrastructure strategy. And that's the key document is our long-term plan. And of course, every year we have an annual plan, and every 3 years the annual plan is part of the long-term plan process. But every other year we get to update the annual plan, and it is simply an updating exercise. So the detail of the annual plan is contained in the long-term plan, and it's been, in this instance, developed by the previous council. The previous council, in developing that annual plan, based it on the information that was available to it at this time, which is why it's important that we have an opportunity to review it on an annual basis. And particularly, I know for new councillors, it can be a somewhat bewildering process because, of course, it's a process which actually doesn't allow for the kind of surprises that inevitably arise in a council situation, and we have some of those in the context of this document. So the first thing that we do is look at the annual plan that was put in place, and of course major projects that the council has on its books are already locked and loaded, as it were, in the context of the long-term plan. And so the amount of changes that we can make in terms of the annual plan are not hugely significant, but in this instance we've got large costs that have been brought into play, and we've identified those and called them out in the context of the plan that we're looking at here. We've managed to get the overall rates increase down from that which was proposed in the long-term plan, but probably the most significant impact has been on the average household rate, which reduces down to an average of 2.74%. And that is a significant reduction on where it was before. And there are a whole lot of reasons why that is the case. And I'm going to invite the staff to explain that. But essentially, when you've got a revaluation of your properties within the context of a year, then comparing one year with the previous year is actually somewhat challenging to do, and it isn't an apples with apples situation. But I will let the experts explain that much better than I will. With the incoming council having updated our strategic framework and with a focus on the priorities that we have established collectively as a council, they are now called out in the context of this annual plan, and I think that they will be a very good basis for framing the bigger conversation that we will have next year when we go into the long-term plan. Although they have made a significant difference, I think, in terms of a positive impact on here. And obviously we still have major issues, and I'm going to come back to some of those when we enter into debate. But I just really wanted to set the context for today, which is that the annual plan is the third year of the long-term plan that was put in place by the previous council. We have asked the Chief Executive to focus on bringing the impact on rates down, and that has been achieved against a backdrop which has seen major increases being applied, and $15 million are called out in the initial stage, and of course we know that has an instant impact on rates of 3%. So it's a major impact when you've got operational costs of $15 million that suddenly you have to find in the context of an annual plan. So we're at where we are at the moment. I think that it would be a mistake to think that the downward pressure is not going to continue over the next few months. And when we vote on the annual plan on the 26th of June, I suspect that it will be a different document from the one that it is today, and will certainly signal that desire to push down the level of rates increases that impact on those that have found that it's been very challenging in a post-earthquake environment with the significance of the rates increases that have been applied. And that is now one of our strategic priorities, collectively agreed and supported around the table. So that's where we want to end up. So if I hand over to the staff, and if we could make a presentation on the annual plan. I've also got Sam McDonald, who's going to, as the Deputy Chair of the Audit and Risk Management Committee, present the report of the Audit and Risk Management Committee. And I'm actually thinking that I might get the staff to speak, I might get Sam to speak, and then we'll open it up for questions. And when we're at a point where we can move and second and then open up for debate, I think we'll adjourn for our morning tea at that point and then debate the plan. But that will help us get to that point. So if I could hand over to you, Carol, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Look, as highlighted, the annual plan is year 3 of the long-term plan. And so the process for an annual plan is setting out the key changes from the long-term plan. And you'll see in both the financial overview and the consultation document, we highlight what some of those key changes are. And there are 3 really big ones that are in there. The first of those is around the Eco Central recycling fees. The second is around the MB interpretation of the Holiday Act. And then the final one is around the council's infrastructure and the rates on that. So cumulatively, those 3 account for about $15.6 million. So that is roughly 3% of rates increase. So with that in there, we've had to find and look at other areas to identify savings so that we can look at making sure that the overall increase is within the LTP. And so you'll recall that the LTP for this year had a 5% rates increase. Overall, we've come in at an average of 4.65, but more importantly for our residents, the residential rates will increase by an average of 2.74. Now, it's fair to say that probably only about 40 to 50% of our residents will get that 2.74%, because it's quite complex this year because there have been revaluations citywide, and so some properties have gone up, some properties have stayed the same, and some have gone down. So on average, it is a 2.74% increase for the average residential ratepayer, and that assumes the average capital value increase of, I believe it's 1.7, but not everybody will receive that increase. So, and Diane will talk a little bit more around that rate breakdown for us shortly, but before I invite Diane to do that, I would like to invite Peter to just step through and outline the process steps that we've run through. You'll appreciate the annual plan's a really significant piece of work for council, and we've followed a really robust process, and Peter will talk us through that.
Good morning. Look, I'll keep this brief. There are the three changes that Carol just outlined are not direct drivers of service that the public receives. So the bigger picture of the process is that the rates reduction has been decreased, but without any loss to levels of service for the community. There are a few non-material changes, but it hasn't been at the expense of service delivery. The key point was that large material decisions other than those three have been held over for the long-term plan process. That obviously is being driven by a root and branch review of both budgets and service delivery. But that will be done over this year in a considered and measured way, in which everything's sort of connected and seen as a joined up approach rather than a random one. Councillor McDonald will speak to this, but the Audit and Risk Committee has reviewed the draft and found an extensive range of management sign-offs that the document is fit for purpose. It meets the requirements of good governance. Diane will speak to the revised consultation document and the narrative in there. But to put it in a nutshell, this is the result of a lengthy series of workshops with councillors, with management. There's been discussion with key stakeholders. The Audit and Risk Committee has found the process fit for purpose with very minimal change. So we can proceed confidently today on that footing. I don't know if you wish to talk to the RMC issues now or...
Thank you, Peter. I think it might be worthwhile if you would like to perhaps give the report now, Sam, and then we can just include it across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, firstly, Kim Wallace, who is the chair of Audit and Risk, sends her apologies. She did want to be here, but it's just unfortunate timing clash. Look, as Peter mentioned, this went through a really robust process, and the point to focus on here is that Audit and Risk's function is to check the processes of how we get to the annual plan. It's not necessarily on the actual rise itself, but it's on how we got there. So there was a high degree of comfort over the staff's work, the management sign-off, and how we got there. We did make a few sort of non-material tweaks to the annual report just to make it more easy to understand, which the staff were able to sort of capture in that first one out. But on the whole, the elected members on there, being Andrew, Leanne and myself, along with the independents, were comfortable of how we got to that point. So it's just really worth re-emphasising, the audit and risk side of it is the check and balance over the annual plan. It's not about the rise itself, but in the end we landed in a position where we're more than comfortable of how it is. So there were no concerns flagged at that meeting.
Thank you.
And thank so just a few points, please, just to expand on what people have already said, and referring to the actual council paper itself rather than the attachments, page 2 and paragraph 4.1, where we set out what the rates are, just perhaps to make some of these things a little clearer. What you will have heard referred to already is that the council's infrastructure has increased in value because we've had a citywide revaluation. And we do pay rates on our infrastructure. Our rates went up by 5 million, which is 1%, which is what the paragraph there is referring to, that if that did not happen, rates would have been held at 3.7. We've always had to pay rates on our infrastructure, and in the past we've not had the big increases other than going back before the earthquake, because we've not put in year on year or 3 year on 3 year the massive replacement and development that we've had recently. The second point is just looking at the residential, business and rural, and Carol's already referred to this, and to Leanne, refer to what you said about apples and apples. It's sort of an apples and a fruit salad, because because everything's been revalued and all the property values don't go up by the same amount. You'll see there that rural has increased quite significantly over residential. Rural property values increased a lot, business increased some, residential didn't increase as much, and not everyone pays the same rates depending on what services they receive. So while we've endeavoured to give you a reasonable year-on-year comparison for an average, we all know that averages it's hard to spot who the average is, but that is trying to give you a year-on-year comparison. And I certainly look forward to working with the councillors between the draft and the final to identify further savings that can be made as a result of the exercise that's currently underway in order to bring about reduced rates. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, I'll open it up for questions. Pauline.
Clarification on the Northern Corridor budgets, and just whether it's a CapEx on page 16, and we're talking about $16 million, and then in another point later on we've got the downstream effects of 2.5 million are rolled into the 16 million. Does that mean that that 16 million contains that 2.5? Or does it mean the work program's rolled in and it's actually 18.5? I'm just a bit confused.
So that was page 16.
Yeah. So it's just whether that 16 million includes the 2.5 or whether that 2.5 on the intersection improvements is additional.
I'm struggling to find the 16, I'm very sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Can I just come and have a look at your screen, please?
Hang on, I'll just... I don't know, I've just put it in my notes at page 16. Must be.
16 is on page 15. The 16
Is it?
middle column, so halfway down.
Yeah. So there we go. We've
There
got
we are, page 15.
16 million, and then you've got, later on, you've got a 2.5 in the...
No, they'll be separate.
So it's additional?
Yes.
Okay. So it's actually 18.5 for the downstream.
We're just trying to give as much detail as we can.
Yeah, thanks, Diane.
Sam.
Thanks very much. Just in terms of the fees and charges, so obviously there's the movements in terms of the on-street parking, the minor openings of the stormwater and things like that. I just see in the comments it's got new fee is based on the fee in 2010/2011 escalated by local government costs, which is about 6.4%. Can you just talk me through, is that 6.4% local government inflation since 2010? Oh, sorry guys.
Fees and charges.
Page 125. I'm just trying to understand how we've got to those new figures based on local government inflation. Because a lot of them say 6.4%.
That would appear to be what it's saying, yes. And that, I think they haven't been changed for a while, and the manager in charge of that is saying that, yes, local government inflation, which we all know is higher than CPI, is led to the increase in costs.
So there's been a 6.4% rise in that since 2010.
Yeah, so it hasn't
Cumulative.
been changed since 2010.
Yeah, cumulative.
Okay, cool.
Melanie.
I was just looking at the levels of service, so page 86, for example. I was just wondering if it could be explained how the target percentages have been arrived at.
I've asked the manager who's proposing those changes to speak to those. I don't believe she's here at the moment. Might be a little early in the meeting. Would it be possible to defer that for a few minutes, and I'll give her a call and ask her to come down and step through it?
Great, thank you.
I don't have the full rationale at my fingertips.
Great, yep.
Okay.
Yanni.
Thank you. Three questions, sorry. The first one is, I did put in a question yesterday, sorry if you haven't had time to get the response, but do we have a capital program change sheet that we can easily see, that we can put out to the community as part of the consultation document around the changes in the capital program identified across the life of the LTP?
Yes, we do, and we can send that out. We believe we've done that in previous years, and we can send that out again this year.
I mean, it's up to the mayor, but in terms of changing the consultation document or adding an additional
The
piece of information.
consultation document is required by law not to contain the annual plan. It's a summary of the changes that are being made, and it's supposed to be in plain language and as simplified as possible. So the law has requirements around it. Making that information available in a public way, online, for example, it will certainly be done in time for the consultation. I thought it had already been
and we could
put online.
make it available in hard copy at some of our libraries and service centres.
But it's as soon as, I mean, we've got to pass this first before it goes up. So
I
it's not going to
understand
go
that.
up before we put this out.
But
for
can we get that circulated to us as well? Because I think it's be quite
Carol
useful.
has put out page 18 does have draft annual 80, does have draft changes there. If you want it by ward, I'm sure it can be resorted. And as you say, not part of the consultation document, but just made available.
Just made available. And you can do it by way of links. It just says that the Act is quite clear that this is supposed to be a plain language document that makes it easy for people to understand what the changes are and what they need to
Sorry, can I just? I couldn't hear what page you said.
80.
80 in our agenda.
Yeah, there are changes there, but you may want it in a different format, and I know pretty certain we've done that before, so it wouldn't be hard to do it again.
Yeah, we have done it.
Because I just am mindful of the number of submitters that came last year who said they cannot make an informed submission because the information isn't easy to understand about what's proposed to be changed. And I just thought that that spreadsheet is personally is probably one of the best spreadsheets I've seen that actually shows very clearly to people, here's the changes that are going to happen. Just wanted to check on the fees and charges. So the car parking increase, do we know in general terms how much money we're expecting to get from parking at the current rate versus what the increase in charges will bring in? And what modelling is that based on?
We do, but I don't have that detail available right now, but I can certainly get it in the break and come back later if that's acceptable.
I think that would be useful. I think in the past when we've increased on-street parking fees, what we see is people are reluctant to put more money in. So actually it doesn't bring in the same amount of revenue just in a simple sort of calculation, because actually people only put in a little bit rather than putting in a lot more.
What you're saying, yep.
And just the final question was in regards to the hot salt water pools. I see that we're going to consider a report on March 12th. So I'm just sort of wondering why these fees are in here now, rather than being an amendment to the plan later on when we've had a chance to consider the information.
I understood the fees were already in the previous schedule of fees and charges, but again, I'm sorry, I would have to defer to someone else to answer that question.
Okay, cool.
I'm not sure
Thanks.
who that is.
Can somebody get an answer to that question for us? Because that would be useful. I mean, there's, obviously the hot pools are due to open, so they must have a basis for charging when they open. So I presume that there is an existing fee schedule. That would be good. Aaron?
Yeah, so it's you only kind of beat me to it. It was on the on-street parking, so we've got an increase of 29%. And it says here the reasoning is the subcommittee intends to increase the rate that is applied within the range of, in line with transport objectives. What's the objective of a 29% increase? Is it more money or less parking?
Richard?
I think Mr Osborne can clarify that for you.
Is that the objective?
So, as Carol alluded to, we haven't put up the on-street parking charges since 2012, I think. They're very cheap by comparison in other cities around the country. And in terms of the objectives of the council's strategic documents speak to a desire to encourage people to more sustainable modes of transport. And if you provide free, cheap plentiful parking, that simply encourages more people to use their private vehicles. So it is in line with Council's strategic direction. We consider from a staff perspective that the increase is minimal. It's unlikely to result in people not using on-street parking. We are trying to make it easier as well. We currently have a surcharge fee from the, well, $3.10 is just a weird number, and it's as a result of rounding that's occurred. I think we used to increase it by 10 cents each year, and as I said, we haven't done it for 8 years now. So, and we're also looking to take off the credit card fee that people currently charge, so to encourage people to use that form, because we've had a number of break-ins to our parking meters in the central city of late as well. So that's the rationale behind it.
That's interesting. Sorry, I hadn't noticed that. So there's kind of a bit of a quid pro quo. Not that that's
there is.
That's not a phrase I'd like to use at the moment. But it's a so the credit card fee comes off the transaction, so that you're actually encouraging people to use credit cards.
That's correct, because a lot of people don't carry, well, there's a certain
a
portion of the
lot of people
population
don't carry cash.
Yes, a lot of people don't carry cash.
Yeah.
There's a certain portion of the population that still like to use cash, so we're still going to cater for those. But over the last financial year, we've had a number of break-ins to our parking facilities, and it is preferable from council's perspective, even though there's a credit card fee at the moment. It is better for us if people use that form of payment.
So we would absorb the fee.
Yes.
But the quid pro quo is that the actual coin rate goes up. I mean, the dollar amount, well, it goes up 90 cents.
I can't remember what the fee is. I'd have to check on that.
It's $3.10. I know.
Well, it's $3.10 at the moment. I'm not sure what the credit card fee is on top of.
No. But the amount that you collect goes up, but we absorb within that increase the amount of the credit card fee.
That's correct.
Yeah. No, that's good. Sorry, that somebody had their hand up over here.
Yeah, I was about that.
Yeah, no, I'll go to James and then to you.
It was about that credit card fee. So you've just explained, I think, Leanne, that the 50 cents still goes to the bank, and we're absorbing the 50 cents. Is that what you're saying?
So we're trying to encourage more people to use that form of payment, because one, it costs us money to go and pick up the change or the cash, and two, as I mentioned, a lot of people are breaking in and stealing it, so we don't get that money back. So it is actually of benefit to council to encourage credit card payment of on-street parking.
No, I get all that, but I'm saying, who pays does the bank not get its 50 cents, or does it get its 50 cents from us? In other words, are we getting a net $3.50?
The bank still gets paid, and we absorb the cost.
It's not 50 cents though, is it?
Yeah, it is.
Is it? Okay.
That's why I don't use it.
Yeah. I use it. I use it because I never have cash on me. Mike.
Thanks. Just on that note, I just wanted to make sure that obviously off-street car parking buildings, the price there's not going up, and it's still cheaper than the current rate of on-street car parking.
Off-street varies, because we only have Litchfield Street and a limited amount of parking in the art gallery, so it varies per parking building. None of those are proposed to go off. This is only for on-street, and I can't remember exactly what we charge at Litchfield Street just off the top of my head. My apologies for that. I think it's around $4 an hour.
No, it's less than that.
Less than that.
It's less than $3.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions, Anne?
So, just thinking about the document as a whole and what we hope to achieve, another word for consultation is dialogue. So I'm actually quite interested in the plans that the organisation has to ensure that we have open and honest and comprehensive dialogue with our communities. So I'm wondering if you can just outline, I know that at the end of the document there are plans. Just wondering how people will know where to come if they want to talk to, to talk to their submission, when the dates will be, and what the And how can we remind people to get involved?
Thanks. I'll defer to Katie, who knows the answer to that.
So the draft annual plan consultation document will be made available online on our Have Your Say pages and will be in hard copy in our council libraries and service centres. We'll be emailing out to a pretty extensive stakeholder database now of community networks and individuals to let them know that consultation has started. We'll be translating the consultation posters into about 5 languages to let people know that the consultation is happening at the moment. We've got a media schedule that includes the press, community newspapers and stuff. We've got some opportunities for face-to-face engagement. So from a civic central city conversation, we'll be having a couple of drop-ins at Turanga, one during the day and one in the evening. And we're working with boards and your local governance teams to work out what opportunities there are in your local area that's going to suit your communities. And we're going to be making the most of our communications channels as well. So there'll be newsline stories and social media. And as we've done in previous years, if people leave extensive comments on Facebook, we're going to be encouraging them to put in a submission.
That sounds really thorough. Thank you. I note that you have plans to offer residents opportunities to meet with their local councillors and community board. Many people don't know who they are. Is there a way that we can perhaps, help people with that?
Yes, I'm sure there will be, and I can work with the governance teams to figure out how we might be able to best approach that. There's obviously opportunities, local events that might be happening in your area at the same time as the consultation's happening, an opportunity to go along there, and we certainly have plenty of council collateral, flags and things like that, which can draw attention to if we were to have a stand at something. But I'll take note of that, and I can work directly with the governance managers on something there.
I think some of the community boards and some of the councillors in the past have just gone out and had that at supermarkets and various other places. I mean, going where the people are is actually more important than expecting the people to come where we are. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yanni, then Jimmy.
Sorry, I just had one question. On the fees and charges, we're raising the deposit for a key from $25 to $50. It just seems quite expensive, and I couldn't quite understand the rationale for it. I wouldn't imagine that getting a key replacement or a swipe card would cost $50.
Which page are you on?
Yeah, 122.
Which sort of facility?
For halls.
For pools.
Halls?
Halls.
So, because I know previously, I think our board has asked if staff could actually put in smart locks on our facilities that would stop people driving to Papanui to get a key to hire a hall in Fendleton, but it's just on page 122.
Yeah, this is lost keys and access cards.
Refundable deposit keys and access cards.
It is a refundable fee, so it's, again, perhaps the manager could speak to it, but I imagine it may have been increased to encourage people to return it.
Yes, but can we find out? I mean,
Yes,
you know, if we're actually going out with a doubling of a fee, then just saying that probably isn't sufficient.
Yeah, it says to
I
better
think
cover
what
the
Yanni's
cost.
saying, I mean, previously this additional charges was known as lost keys and access charges. So, you know, people were losing keys, but if it's going from 25 to 50, there must be a reason for it. So what is the reason?
We always have to take in labour costs into this as well, so that if we have to send somebody off to a key cutter, you know, it's time as well. It's not just the actual cost of the key, it's actually labour costs for somebody to drive off to a key cutter, stand.
There won't be just one key though, Mary. I mean, it's
not going to cost $50.
The truth is that the replacement keys, they won't be the only set of keys. So it's not as though
They will have to replace them. They will have to go off and get them. I mean, we are trying to cover our costs.
yeah, but it's doubled, and I don't know when the last time it changed. I mean, all it needs is just a note as to why. You know, it's just a why. I mean, we aren't to use my favourite expression, nickel and diming on the annual plan.
And the bigger issue, which our board has raised repeatedly, is when we had hearing that people were driving halfway across the city to get keys to hire a community hall in a different suburb. Actually, we should be putting in smart technology in our community facilities. That means it's remote access, programmable, and it costs about $200 for a smart lock, American, maybe $400 New Zealand. And then you solve this whole issue of wasting time for people going across the city, staff having to go get keys cut. It just doesn't seem a very good way of addressing what's a
This may well be, but
Yeah.
Yanni, we're not going to introduce new technology off the back of an annual plan change on a refundable fee. So, I do think that it's right to question these things, but this is the draft consultation, and I'm sure the public will raise issues that they may be concerned about. Hiring halls always has a cost if you don't return the key. It is a refundable cost. So, but understanding the reason why may in fact lead us to an alternative way of looking at how it's done in the future, but not right now. Yeah, right. So that helps explain. Yes.
Right, so just as background is that in the LTP, DCL put in an operational budget, but it wasn't. But the fees and charges weren't set. So now RSU has picked up the operating of that facility because we couldn't find a private provider to do it. So RSU are doing it. They've put the draft fees and charges into the annual plan because the pool's about to open, but that won't come into force till 1 July. So the pools are due to open in March, and so a paper is coming. That's why the paper's coming to council and to the board for that period between March and July to set some fees until they come into force in the annual plan.
Yeah,
So
that
Nigel
was,
can answer all the details about how they've been set and estimated, because there's been considerable work on that.
that was identified in the plan itself. It said that they would be set closer to the opening for that reason.
normal admission costs to the hot salt water pools.
In terms of the report will come to on the 12th of March, we'll have those that you'll get to approve. In the draft annual plan, it talks about a fee of $18 for people that come, and then there's a resident rate of $14 to enter the pool. I'm talking one fee. There's a number of concession cards, membership options, and that are in the draft annual plan.
Okay,
and it will be in the report on the 12th of March.
Yeah.
All right.
Probably,
yep.
if you want to know in terms of the business case that talked through and had fees in those original business cases, but it was average pricing, didn't apply any fees to concession cards, to members, to discounts, however that would work. Hence, the fees are slightly different from what was in that original business place, but you'll receive all that information when we have a briefing and then the council report on the 12th of March to set the fees between when we open and when 1st July arrives.
Right. I think, yeah, we probably would have anticipated making the decision a bit earlier, but I know that there's been a lot happening. All right, so thank you for that. So it will be setting the fees on the 12th of March?
Yes.
Yeah, and they will apply till the 30th of June,
So then,
and essentially what then is written into the annual plan becomes the fees and charges for the following year.
yes.
Cool, thank you. All right, Jimmy?
Thank you, Mayor. One question, particular in relation to the public consultation. Because based on staff, the information, particularly emphasize all those relevant the information document, including consultation document, will be put on the council, the library, service center, etc., also on the council website. I remember last time I asked the question, Horticulture Committee, I have not yet get a reply. Because at the moment on our council website, we have a function, the translation in 11 different languages. My question is, if the people, residents or ratepayer, feedback to the council, particularly for the written the kind of the feedback, whether they use the 11 within one of those 11 languages, whether council can receive or not, or still need to written in English. Feedback to us, particularly for the written the submission.
I believe we can receive it, and we'll obviously then have to translate it. I don't. I believe that's the case, though I will double check with all languages that we have there, because I'm not sure if it's going to be the case with all of them, but I believe that we can.
Okay, thank you. It's my question.
Could I just suggest that we've got Sarah here now who could talk about the levels of service changes?
Yes, that would be good. Thank you.
Hello. Sarah Newman, Head of Citizen and Customer Services. I understand there was a question about the customer satisfaction level of service.
Yeah, I just had a question about how those numbers have been arrived at.
Yeah, so we're undertaking quite a bit of work to measure our customer satisfaction. So currently we have an annual resident survey, which is the only feedback we get in relation to our services across all of our channels, phone, face-to-face and email. And what I'm proposing is we break those satisfaction levels out to each of those channels, because what we are noticing that particularly the experience of email, which has increased exponentially because of SnapSenseOf, because that's how it comes into council, people's experience of that service, because there isn't a face-to-face, there isn't any personal interaction, there's nothing to measure other than I sent that thing very efficiently and quickly to council, but nothing has been done. So the feedback we're getting is that actually what we're measuring is you didn't fix that pothole, or it took 3 months for you to mow the burn. So we really want to understand how is that as a channel for providing a service, how can we improve that, which is why I want to break them down into individual measures, as we've had in the past. But also we're going to incorporate things like post-call survey, so that people can tell us in real time how we are performing for both our phone and our email channel. And we do mystery shop as well as audit benchmarking across the industry on how our services are perceived. So I want to fold all of that into those satisfaction levels of service rather than relying purely on the resident survey.
So, I didn't really want to go into the numbers, but for instance, in the walk-in service, at the moment people's satisfaction is, over the last sort of 5 years, has been between 95 and 98%, which is brilliant.
Yes.
So why have we got at least 85% as our target?
Yeah, so we did a bit of research into, because you could keep going, you could go to 100%.
But
So
we
did-
could set it at 95 if we're already achieving it anyway, and I would like to think that we're always not aiming for 100, but aiming to be at least as good as we have been, if not better.
Yes, and that's absolutely right. This is the baseline benchmark. So absolutely, it's not about not achieving 98 or striving for 100%. We've done some research on what's a best practice benchmark, and so that's just a starting point. And so we've applied that to these levels of service. Not saying that that's our target.
But it does
say target.
that. You
I would like that one to go up.
That's the thing that nobody got, and I think, it has been raised. I mean, I agree with Melanie, is if we are achieving 98% at walk-in, then why would we accept a target of at least 85% of citizens and customers are satisfied or very satisfied by the quality? I mean,
I'd make that 95.
Eh?
I would make that 95.
No,
But this is-
it's being reduced. I mean, at the moment, it's
It's at
28.19.
So it's
What was the 2019-20 target? Was it at 86%? I mean, we've dropped it.
But that's
anyway.
across all channels, not just
Hey?
walk. That's across all channels, not just walking.
Yeah.
That's right.
So where's the target for the previous?
On the next page, is the current, you'll see.
No.
Yeah, so 2018-19, at least 87%, 19-20, 89%, 20-21, 89%.
So why have we gone to 85 for 2020-21? Why are we reducing it?
Because that's a benchmark. That's at least 85.
But at the moment, the target is 89. Why would we reduce it to 85? We're achieving well above it.
Well, so I'm open if you're not happy that 85 as a base benchmark is good enough, we could put in an individual levels of service for each of them based on what we've achieved an average over the last few years. So as you can see for walk-in, 98 was achieved in 18-19 and 97 in 17-18.
I'd like to see that as a minimum of 95 for walk-in, because we're already achieving it, and I'd always like to be looking to do better, or at least the same as we were at now.
These shouldn't be targets. I mean, the thing is that they should be your minimum expectations, you know,
Yeah.
like, I mean, in customer satisfaction, citizen satisfaction, I hate that word customer, they are,
Sorry. I turned you off, didn't
Yes,
I?
I know.
I do apologise.
Were you
Madam
telling
Mayor.
me something?
I might have been.
Yeah.
I wonder if I could assist.
Yes.
I think there's a combination of factors here that we need to consider. I think actually the terminology doesn't help either. When people think targets, that thinks where you're aiming to, when in reality what we're talking about is surpassing. So it's either a
More
minimum
than 5
requirement
surpass.
or something of that nature, which is probably what we would require to do. I also want to ensure that we keep our performance up, but neither do I want us to set ourselves to fail. So I think it's a mature discussion we need to have on levels of service about where they should be, but that absolutely should be part of the LTP.
Yes, I agree with you that it should be part of the LTP, but we've kind of raised this concern, not just now, but we have raised this concern about the reduction in expectation that this signals. So, and there is absolutely no way that we want to signal anything but onwards and upwards. And I know that you feel exactly the same way. So I'm just wondering whether if we could take this offline, but in terms of what goes out for consultation, just an adjustment that has the breakout, and a target's probably the language required by the levels of service. Is that right?
You to set the level of the service.
Oh, so it's not a target.
No.
You don't have to call it a target. You can have it as an expectation.
It is, but it's measured against the level. So whether you succeed or not, it's still a clear pass-fail.
Yeah. So, yeah, the word target can be misleading. But anyway, if we have at least 95% for the walk-in,
Yep.
at least 80% for the
Email.
yeah, email's difficult. I mean, I agree with you that it's about where you have personal contact.
Yeah.
From emails, text messages, you can't tell. You don't make an emotional connection. That's why they use emojis, so that my sarcasm is actually reflected in the little man with the little face with the dark sunglasses. No, sorry,
That's cool.
irony.
That means cool.
Irony. Yeah, no, but I am cool. So, but the point. See, I don't even know what the emojis stand for. All I know is that I want to kind of indicate to somebody that I'm not criticising them. I'm actually cool with it. But just saying. A few of you would have had those. So you've now realised that I've now connected with you in a completely different way than you realised that I was connecting with you. It's called irony. Anyway, the point is that on a face-to-face personal contact, our people do incredibly well. That's the truth of it.
Absolutely.
And when people go in and get help in a library, when they go in and get help at a service centre, when they call the call centre, you know, they're making a human contact. They can hear the tone of voice, you know. So it's those ones that we expect a higher level of response to than the email and the and the snap, send, solve. And there are other ways that we can address those, and they're the long-term plan issues. I think, so if we could just sort of say that in this particular area we can sort out the targets against actual performance in a way that sends a powerful message that we expect the onwards and upwards. But we'll properly review what are the other strategies that we could use in those non-human contact environments that could make them more human, or give people better feedback, which would enable the response to be improved. So that they're the ones that you'd target.
Yeah, and hence the intention of breaking them out rather than having a holistic measure.
Yeah. Okay, so if we could just adjust the ones where...
Just the walk-in.
Adjust the walk-in, really. It's the human contact. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Will we record that down, or...?
It will be in the committee list, won't it? Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, it'll be in the list for the minutes, so it will be dealt with in the annual plan. So the annual plan as goes out will have that adjustment in it. Thanks for raising it, Melanie. Yeah. James.
Can we do those all later? Because I'm sort of sitting here wondering if this is the best place to go through, you know, the targets for the levels of service. And, you know, if we're being frank, that fees and charges, there's probably 101 things I disagree with, and probably the targets. You know, I think they should be stretch targets, so I agree. But I just don't really think that if we're going into these right now,
no, this was one that had been raised, and you know, that's why. You know, I mean, I'd kind of forgotten about it because but it has actually been raised as an issue. We will go through the detail of these in the context of the next few months as we come up to the 26th of June. But I think with this one, because it's actually an area where the council does really, really well, you don't want to send the signal that we're losing a sense of you know, ambition in terms of achievement in this space I think it was put really well. These have been pulled out into the individual categories, which then highlights you know, the fact that overall, and it just shows you what averages do, overall that you know, that you might have 85%, but we do 98% at walk-in. And there's a reason for that. It's because you're talking to a human being who's really pleased to see you and happy to help. Aaron?
I'm going to ask the really dumb, obvious question, but in the change of fees, in a lot of them, there's a movement of from 2010-11, like an escalation. I'll just give an example of residential parking permits, and it says an increase from $54 to $60. It's 11.1%. New fee is based on the fee of 2010-11 escalated by local government cost inflation since that year. But we're told every year that local government inflation's a lot higher than regular inflation on here. So now I'm confused.
It doesn't mean it reflects at all, but again, I'd probably better have the manager concerned come and talk to it, because they do make the recommendations.
Oh, that's fine. I just wondered that if it, like, ratepayers be wrapped if the local government rate of inflation was 11.1% from 2011 to now. I'd be over the moon, in fact. I'm seeing people lining up outside with flowers.
Can perhaps somebody explain, you know, really for the edification of those that are observing from outside, what the process is for fees and charges? Because, you know, there is an assumption that councils signed off on these. But we don't sign off on these until the 26th of June. So, so can you just explain the process for bringing the fees and charges schedule in at the draft stage?
Yes, we ask each of the businesses to make their recommendations for fees and charges, whether they want to change them or not. They are made at the level of the manager who is closest to the business, signed off by whoever is more senior. General managers are supposed to have, and from just talking with Mary it would seem don't always come to them, but the general manager is supposed to have seen and signed off on all fees and charges before they come to council, because you'd appreciate at varying levels of the organisation you often need to bring a little more senior nous to it to go, well, you might want that, but it's not reasonable. And that is the process that is to be followed. You're right, it doesn't come to councillors, but that can be built into the briefing documents in future, so that it's discussed as part of the briefing. Most of the fees and charges, you'll note, actually haven't changed by much at all. Some have stayed the same, some have gone down, and we try to bring the major ones in a summary sheet, so to save councillors having to go through pages and pages and pages. So that's the process that is followed. It is, I thought, a robust process, but I can see as a result of this discussion this morning that it could be improved.
And just following on from that, would it be fair to say that at some stage during the period between 2010, which is the last time that some of them were increased, that there would have been recommendations from council staff or officers to council, and that council, after hearing submissions on them, have actually declined to increase the fees?
And that tends to happen in parking and also swimming, although often, usually it's the councillors that decide they don't wish to increase swimming pool fees because of the desire of council to encourage recreation and make it available for families. So, so yes, it doesn't come up every year, but you're right, it does come up every now and then, because staff will look at it again and go, this hasn't been changed for a while and we really feel we need to recommend an increase.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just think it is useful to remind people of the sequence of events and the process that is adopted, because there are examples where officers bring increases, recommended increases to council, but in this process they hear the submissions, and at the end of the process they vote to change, either to reduce or to not accept the increase. So I'm just telling councillors that there are processes that we can go through. That council ultimately is the one that has to sign off on the 26th of June on what the charges are.
Yes.
Yep. All right. Are there any other questions? No. Right. So where are we? 10:30. Right. So, so I'm just wondering whether we want to stop for morning tea now. I know it's early, but stop for morning tea and then regroup for the debate. So, but look, just to put the motion on the table, I shall move the motion, but just to note to councillors that the wording has been adjusted this morning, and so what I'm moving is that we adopt the information for consultation, so adopts for consultation. The agenda that you had in front of you use the words approves and adopts the information. We are legally obliged to adopt the information for consultation prior to adopting the consultation document, and so then you'll see that the second one, which approves the rate requirement will change over the period of the consultation, and so we're simply noting the rate requirement at this stage. We're not voting on the rate requirement. And we're noting the recommendation of the Council's Audit and Risk Management Committee, and once that is then resolved, we move into the other thing. So do I have a seconder for the motion? Andrew Turner. So the motion's been moved and seconded, and we'll move into debate, but I'll adjourn for morning tea, and if we could come back at 10:45, we can open up the debate. So thank you very much. Thank you. So when we were here before, we had the adoption of for consultation the information contained or referred to in the staff report, and then noting the rating requirement, and then noting the recommendations of the Council's Audit and Risk Committee. But actually there are other recommendations as well. So there's authorises the General Manager of Finance and Commercial to make any non-material changes to the documents, etc. before it goes out. And just a change to the wording for number 5. So it just reads adopts for public consultation instead of approves and adopts. So we're just adopting it for the purposes of public consultation. And then 6, changing approves the following process for consultation, just to authorise the following process for consultation. We're just looking to see whether there can be some stretching around the dates for the consultation period, because we know that some community groups meet at the beginning of a month, and it can be hard if you open on the 2nd of the month and close on the 2nd of the month. It can be tricky for people that are right at the very beginning of the month rather than at the end. So it's probably easier for community groups that have their meeting in the last week of the month rather than the first week of the month. So we're just looking at that. So it's just authorise the following process essentially, and that gives the council staff some flexibility around the numbers. So we'll move and second the whole lot, but what we're doing. Oh no, I've got the date wrong. We meet on the 23rd of June, do we? To adopt the annual plan. I thought it was the 26th. I don't know why. But we will do them separately, because we have to pass one resolution before we pass the adoption of the consultation document. We have to adopt the earlier resolutions first before we adopt that one. So I'll just go through them one at a time. All right?
What's the difference between approves and authorises? All we're doing is just authorising a process for consultation, but I just wanted the council to have some flexibility around the dates. So if they wanted to go out a bit earlier, they could, and if they wanted to go out a bit later, they could. So as I stated, the question is the difference between approves and authorises. I don't understand the difference.
What? Yeah, I mean, it's just, well, I'm happy to put it back to approves, but...
the difference is all.
But there isn't any difference, but anyway. But I just kind of wanted to signal some flexibility to the organisation. So change it back to approves.
I'm not challenging it, I'm just questioning what's the difference.
Probably negligible, but I was trying to think of a way, the following process for consultation, and then put subject to the ability to increase the consultation period if possible.
Oh.
I mean, that's what I want to be able to do. If it's possible, it may not be possible. There's always been some flexibility at the end of a process for things to come in a bit late if there's good reason for it. So, but we all know from experience, and actually the new councillors won't know this, but people tend to leave their submissions till right at the end. And so you get quite a few at the beginning, and then you get tailing off, and then at the end you get a flood. So that's likely to be the way things are followed. Right, so so I will just commence the debate on this, and it would be helpful if I had my document open. And what I'll do is just go round the table so that people can all contribute to the debate, and it's 3 minutes contribution from each councillor. So there'll be a timer up to make sure that people are very clear about the speaking time that's available to them. Okay, so as I've already indicated to you, the council adopts its long-term plan every 3 years. This is the third year of the last long-term plan, and next year will be the first year of the new long-term plan. And as we've already indicated, the new long-term plan will start to look at risk and resilience in a far more detailed way, and really set the scene for planning for what is an uncertain future. And when I say an uncertain future, it is an uncertain future across the world. And we have got a number of challenges ahead of us. We have re-looked at our strategic framework, and as people can see and have understood, is that ensuring that rates are affordable and sustainable has become one of our strategic priorities, and it is the right time to be doing this. We have been through a significant period. In a couple of weeks we will be recognising the 9th anniversary of the February earthquake in 2011, and of course in September this year it's the 10th anniversary of the very first earthquake that began the sequence that really has impacted on our city in ways that we wouldn't necessarily have anticipated back then. And it is always interesting to go back and look at the 2009 to 2019 LTP and the expectations that were set by council back then, and the rates of increases they were predicting back then, which are significantly higher than where we are right now, which is quite a fascinating point of comparison. But the point of an annual plan is just to make amendments to the plan and taking into account what has occurred. And each year that we have done this, we have been confronted with something that has happened in a way that has impacted on our planning processes in an unexpected way. So we had the flooding in 2014, severe floods, which led to the Mayoral Task Force on Flooding, which led to the Land Drainage Recovery Program being fast-tracked in the way that it was. We've had the Port Hills fire and the impact that that had on our city as well. And of course we lost our drinking water status during this period, and that remains a key priority for us to get our chlorine-free water back, managing what is a pristine supply or source water, and enabling it to be delivered to our residents in a way that doesn't require chlorination, even if it becomes a mandatory requirement with some exemptions being allowed. We've got to keep the momentum going, and that was something that I very much focused on towards the middle of last year, was just to get the momentum going. And that doesn't just mean the central city, although it does mean the central city. We have to continue to ensure that our central city is able to achieve the ambition that was set for it. And I guess I go back often to the Share an Idea, which was a brilliant process run by the council, and unfortunately kind of sidetracked by the blueprint process being overlaid without the feedback loop to people that was so essential to the Share an Idea process. It was a great process, and it led to a very good draft plan being developed. And of course we've also got the focus from our own residents, who tell us over and over again that they want to have their garden city with the focus on parks, roads and footpaths, the basics, getting the basics done, an absolute key approach. The long-term plan next year gives us the chance to get under the lid of the whole plan, with our Chief Executive proposing a zero-base approach to the budget itself, and we are really looking forward to the opportunity to actually really expand our thinking in that regard. So for the big issues, that's what the long-term plan is for. And I know that where we start with this draft annual plan it's not where we're going to end up in June. We're going to end up in a better place. So I'll hand it over to you, James.
Do I get 5?
3.
I was going to sing a song for the last 2 minutes. Look, I began the day with concerns, and I expressed them to the mayor and discussed with the mayor and some councillors who were in the room at the time. And my issue was with the process in dealing with the annual plan. I had some I think, valid issues there, and we discussed it, and I got more clarification and more information on that process, and some of those concerns were shared by other people, and they'll be addressed, and so I'm happy about that. So they've been addressed and alleviated those concerns, and particularly I was struck by the or concerned about the motion initially, which said that we approved the information contained. We've now changed that to adopting for consultation, which I'm comfortable with, and also we were talking about the rate requirement of just over $500 million, and we were going to approve that. We're now noting it. So there's more to life than just process, but that is important when we're dealing with this sort of issue. So now I'm prepared to support. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. Pauline.
Kia ora. Look, I don't think there's much that I can add to your introduction, Leanne. I think you've covered everything really well. I'm comfortable too with the stage that we're at now with this annual plan. I think that we've achieved this without the loss of levels of service or any dramatic increases in fees and charges at this stage. And more importantly, we've actually demonstrated a keenness to keep these rates down, and it's really heartening to see we've reached 2.74% for the average household. That's remarkable, and it's actually, as you said, Leanne, the LTP will be where we'll have a much deeper dive, and more detail will be revealed into the costs of running our city, delivering our levels of service, preparing ourselves for future environmental challenges due to climate change. So I'm happy to support this today to go out to consultation. I'm really looking forward to hearing from the people of Christchurch to come and talk to us on this and to seek their engagement, particularly on helping us to improve our stormwater quality, which we're going to need everyone engaging on that and awareness, and also to help us look at our waste minimisation. That's really a crucial thing to look at too. And noting too that we're continuing to invest in our drinking water improvement program despite what happens in the future. I think that's a very, very good investment. So I'd also like to thank staff for the incredible work again on this, and for putting up with us and all the workshops, and for scurrying off and bringing back more information and more information and more information. So thank you very much. It's been an incredible process to be involved in.
Okay. Sarah.
Kia ora, thank you. It's been frustrating, I guess, at times to see an us versus them narrative in media and social media and commentary across the city, across the nation when it comes to councils and local government, because people forget that the staff and the elected members within the organisation are also ratepayers and residents of the city. They see council as apart from the community, whereas actually we are a part of the community. And we are just as incentivised as anyone else to try and keep rates low, because we pay them too. And every staff member within the organisation pays them as well. And I think people forget what a council is and what a council is there for. A council is basically like a large cooperative where the residents of the city all pitch in a bit of money each to pay for the shared services that we find more efficient to pay for collectively than pay for by ourselves. So if I look at the services that council provides for residents and I think about how much it might cost if we had to pay for those individually, how much would it cost me every week if I had to go and collect my water and transport it home and then get rid of my sewage and my wastewater? How much would it cost me to provide the lighting outside on the street or the piece of roading in front of my house? How many books would I be buying full price for my kids to read? And would I only be able to swim if I owned my own swimming pool? So people need to recognise that while we need to be as efficient with our money and ratepayers' money as possible, this is the best way that we can think of as a city to collectively pay for the things that make our city a place worth living in. And we pay for these things collectively. It's way more efficient, and that doesn't excuse any spending of money that isn't necessary. The change from 5% down to 4.65 headline figures may not seem like a big one, but the narrative, when you just look at those two figures, doesn't include the fact that we have had to cut costs massively to stop the 3% rates rise that would have occurred had we not addressed those three simple things, the rates on infrastructure, the revaluation and the holiday pay. If those things had just been left and we hadn't worked on it, we'd be looking at an 8% pay rates increase instead of what we're looking at now. So we have worked really hard, and staff have worked incredibly hard to look at where savings can be made. I have no doubt that we'll be making more changes based on consultation, because we do every year. Every year, what people say makes a difference, and it's going to be really good to hear from people in the submissions again. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim.
Thank you. Look, I do want to commend staff for getting the 4.65. I think under the current circumstances it's outstanding, going from 5 to 4.65 and keeping much of the what our people want in there as well. So I think that's really important. The Mayor mentioned before about the Port Hills fire. There are ongoing costs, not just with the actual incident itself. And just as an example, we had hundreds and hundreds of people turn up to do planting following the fire. But when we called for people to come and help the maintenance of those plantings, 9 people turned up. So that is an ongoing cost to this council. So we've got to remember that. I mean, the other things that have come to the fore within my time at this council are climate change. Absolutely, it's so important, it affects our planet. But there are costs to that which we are now having to absorb, which our predecessors haven't had to. One of those things is recycling processing fees globally of recyclable materials. This is beyond our control. So we've got to look at the source and how we kind of manage that. So there are a number of things which we are picking up which have been identified or taken responsibility prior to us coming here. The other one would be flooding. In the 1980s, it was the retention basins from the top of the Heathcote, etc. were talked about. No one did anything. We're doing it. We're doing that, and we're keeping rates at 4.65 while we're trying to protect those communities that are affected by river flooding. I think that's outstanding. The dredging, we're back. We've heard a lot of people when we talked about the flooding. We went down and talked to people. They wanted that back because it was one of those things that was visually effective for that reduction in flooding. We're doing that, and that's at an extra cost over and above what we've had previously. So this is a consultation document. That's really important to remember. I think it's a very good document. I think our staff, as I said, have done very well coming at 4.65, and I'm really looking forward to the feedback from the ratepayers of Christchurch. Thank you.
Aaron.
Yeah, this is always a tough one going into rate rises. No one seems to like them. And they're compounding, so every year that it goes up, they just keep stacking on top of the other ones that went up. Current rate of inflation in New Zealand is 1.5%, so this is triple that, and has been well above the rate of inflation. Actually, the only thing that goes up more than rates in this country is cigarettes, and that is because that's a false economy there, because they're being super taxed now to really penalise the poor. And the smokers that can afford it, but mainly they can't, but they still do it. That aside, that's not the debate. It's around rate rises, and I'm not happy with this. I've never been happy, but once again, we'll go out and consult. We'll hear back from people. Probably more of them will ask for us to spend more money than less. That's always the most disappointing thing, is people will whinge to you all year about their rate increases, but then when it comes to the annual plan, the long-term plan, hardly any of them ever turn up and tell us where they don't want us to spend money. Yep. That's what council got to start doing is talking to people about how not to spend money, not how to spend money. I think we get it back to front. So it'll be good to hear from some of those people. People of my ward won't be happy because their house prices, some of them are, the average isn't the average that's here, it's higher, so they'll pay more. And it's an exponential scale as well. The last time I looked, the highest rates in Christchurch for a household were like $36,000 a year. So that's rent to the council, quite high rent too, just quietly. But I believe it's considerably higher than that now. So, you know, these are considerations that we must keep, but we don't look for the savings. Every one of our facilities costs a lot of money. People need to know the value of those costs. We're going to deliver a whole lot more swimming pools. So the average cost, subsidised cost per swim will be going up. But we don't have that conversation with the people. They just come in and tell us they want another pool, or they want another hall, or they want another whatever it is they want, or a set of traffic lights like in my ward, and I'm more than happy to swap another project in my ward. I'll do that when we come to the annual plan, because there's a set of traffic lights that no one's ever asked for in my ward. No one has ever asked for them, but they're planned to come. And more people, 4 times more people last year submitted on a set of traffic lights in my ward that they actually wanted than submitted on the annual plan. But we didn't really listen to them because they've been asking for the last 3 years. And prior to that, they asked since Pat Harry was a councillor, but hopefully they won't be talking about Aaron Kewen the way they talked about Pat Harry, and not delivering on the one set of traffic lights they wanted in their ward for 30 years. But if I can achieve that, I'll get rid of the broken record.
Good. Jake.
Always a tough act to follow, Councillor Kewen. I'm really pleased to be sending this out back to our communities for consultation and to see what they think. Obviously, during the campaign, it's one of the things we heard the most about was rate rises. I think about my constituents in Linwood, a low socioeconomic community with an ageing population who are struggling to keep up with the cost of living, and we aren't making it any easier on them. However, what you'll never hear from constituents is the cost that comes from service reduction, that comes from dramatic rate decreases. So, yeah, with that, I'm really happy to see what the community thinks.
Phil.
Hello. I'm just a newbie here. I'm still learning and learning very fast, but I get the impression I wasn't happy about this to start with. With the annual plan, I feel we're stuck with we've stuck with what we've got. I would have preferred to see the number around 3%. We've got to look at harder for savings, but then I do understand that this is only just putting it out for consultation, and I encourage a lot of people to come and talk to us so that we can come back to the table and say we've got to change things to make everyone else happy. And I think with the new Chief Executive on board with the zero-based budget thing going forward, I'm looking forward to the long-term plan that will make a real difference. And along with what you said, Madam Mayor, that people really want to see, if I could get rid of half of the complaints about parks, roads and footpaths, my job would be a lot easier. Yeah. And that's the easy stuff to fix. Like that people just don't, if they see their cabbage tree leaves in the park every day, they get more and more upset when they walk past and see it, and then they start doing snap, send, solve and getting into everybody. I'd like to work, us all to work more on lowering rates, and we've got to change the way we think, not sort of guard our budgets. Like if we had a little bit left over in some areas, they should be encouraged to give the money back rather than say, oh, I'm getting to the end of the year, I better spend it. So if we can be more efficient on some things and save some dough, I'm sure going forward will be a lot better. Thank you.
Anne.
Kia ora koutou. So today the job ahead of us is to resolve to adopt this draft annual plan and to send it out for consultation, which I'm happy to do. Our challenge as an organisation is actually to make this information accessible and understandable to our residents so that we can actually have an honest dialogue with them. It's got to be meaningful. and it's about how we plan to spend all of our money over the next year. So if we're really serious about getting feedback from our fellow citizens, then we must make sure that the information is readily available and written in a language that is understandable, and that residents are informed about where and when they can give their feedback. Otherwise, we are at risk of reinforcing a view that this is just a cynical exercise to tick a box to say that we've consulted with our communities. Our citizens must see evidence that sending this out to them is a genuine attempt to dialogue and not that cynical box ticking exercise. So our new CE Dawn has talked about creating a new approach where we are working together to get solutions quicker that will be much better for us and our city. So I'm hopeful that this consultation process will achieve it. It may be that we hear that our citizens want the rates to be lower, in which case we've got an awful lot more work to do. And I want to acknowledge the hard work that our staff have done and my fellow councillors on getting us to this point. I look forward to having that very good partnership with community as we go forward to create the city that we all can enjoy, and look forward to those solutions and those results.
Thank you. Sam.
Thank you, Leanne. Look, I've given this a lot of thought and I won't be supporting consulting over this draft annual plan today. In my view, we can't go down this path where rate rises are well outside the scope of inflation, and quite simply 4.65 in my view is not a good starting point, so I won't be supporting it. I think there has been some commentary around it being an amendment to the LTP, and I think that's more than fair enough. But what I would say is there are 6 new councillors here who didn't vote for that last long-term plan, so that is worth noting as well. I think the other thing is we can say quite often that the 2.74 rise on average per household is really good, but I think we do also need to look at the bigger picture and consider the additional costs we're loading on to those whose homes aren't in that 50% like we heard from the staff earlier on, and including our rural residents and commercial properties. In my view, we just continue to burden ratepayers well outside the scope of inflation or their income rises. I mean, having been at council since October last year, in my view, I still continue to observe duplication, inefficiency, and I think process rather than outcomes-based decision-making, which is a real frustration. And I had hoped that when we did begin this process back in November and December that we could have agreed on a rates limit, but that wasn't to be. Look, my view is that there's, within council budgets, a real potential to remove significant waste and unnecessary expenditure by reviewing spending patterns and reducing budgets appropriately. This doesn't mean we need to drop outputs. It simply means we put, like you would in the private sector, a healthy tension on the budget. And I think that's the challenge we have here going forward, is we really need to look at how we implement that healthy tension on the budget. It's not a drop in service, it's simply prioritising our spend. So look, I don't want to be the negative Nancy around the table, but I won't be supporting it today. In my view, I would have liked to have seen more savings before we kicked it off, but I really put the challenge out there that I can vote for it on the day when it comes back, if we can get those savings down. So, yeah, thank you.
Catherine.
I won't be supporting this today either. I do agree with Phil. I think we should have been aiming more in the 3% mark. The ward that I represent in Riccarton, we've got such diversity in our ward. We've got a lot of residents who would be, as part of this, would have rate hikes as exponentially as Aaron, like your ward. But we've also got some residents who the 4.65 increase would just put such burden into their financial situation as well. When I had been campaigning for Riccarton, and throughout my conversations with our residents in Riccarton, it always seemed like our conversations weren't always, why aren't you doing this for our community? It was always, why are you doing this for our community? Why are you putting cycleways on Lockyer Road, for example? Why are you putting trees in the middle of Riccarton Road, for example? So I do agree with Sam in the way that I do think moving forward we do have to put some logic and some sense as to how we manage our money and where we spend them. And in that way, in saying that, I won't be supporting this today.
Melanie.
Well, first of all, I'm pleased to see the change to the 95% level of service for walk-in, because we're already achieving it, so I think that's really great to acknowledge the great service of our staff. I also just wanted to comment on a project in our ward I'm pleased to see is on budget still, which is for Cashmere, Hoonhay and Worsley's intersection. So Tim will agree with me there, and so will the board. Again, with rates rises, I don't think anyone wants to see rates rises, and I understand, you know, it's been a very difficult process to actually get to where we are. It does worry me slightly that the people with the lowest value houses actually have the greatest percentage rate increase, which to me seems not correct. However, I will be supporting it. And I'd also like to challenge those councillors who aren't happy with rates increases to actually name a project that they would like to eliminate from our budget. Because if you're going to say that kind of thing, you need to say where you're wanting to save the money from. I heard one councillor talk about it. And I would also like to think that we would like to listen to traffic staff who actually give really good advice on what is safe and what is not safe, and why, you know, these projects don't come to us randomly. They're well considered. And I can think of $10 million I'd like to save in our ward, not in the next year, but over the next few years. The other thing I'd like to say is I wouldn't like to reduce rates rises if that was to come at the expense of our community. Library services, for instance, I think they're so critical, that kind of thing. And I'd also like to think for the LTP looking forward that I would personally like to increase the amount of money given to the community groups that do so much work for us that is recognised but is not recognised enough, and they deserve more. So I look forward to hearing the submissions that come in from people. I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you.
Yanni.
Thank you. I struggle to support this, but I will support it today. I just wanted to register my opposition, though, to the fees and charges, and I'll discuss that in a minute. But I think for me, there is a lot more work that needs to be done, and I do want to pick up on the point that a number of my colleagues have made in this debate. And I just want to draw your attention fast forward to Thursday, where we've got a report from the Mayor around the Eastern Christchurch Housing Trust. And basically, in short, what that says is, on a tender basis, the repairs probably would have cost the council more than 3 times the amount that the trust has spent restoring this house for housing. And I think we need to start looking at the cost of how we do things, because it seems to me very clear that we are spending a lot of money on some projects, and some of the ones in the central city, for example, Hereford Street's a classic example, in my view, of money which just seems to be going up and up and up, and it's really hard to fathom why these things are costing so much. So I think we do need to take a much more disciplined approach to those costs and how we do things. And I don't think it means doing less, but I think it means doing things differently. But I think the LTP is really the chance to do that. I don't think we really are able to do that for this draft annual plan. And in fact, I do endorse, I guess, some of the comments that have been made, that the things that are beyond our control, like, I mean, we've got the coronavirus. We don't even know what the financial impact of that is going to be, but it is likely to have some sort of impact. We've got the recycling issues, which, as far as I can tell, are only going to get more expensive, not cheaper. And of course, we've got all the other things that go on in the city, like trying to get the chlorine, the temporary chlorine, out of our water supply, which I think has to be critical, alongside fixing our broken infrastructure. And, you know, I think we do need to think about doing the basics well and getting things fixed and repaired before we start thinking of luxury things in this budget. And I think through the annual plan consultation process, hopefully there's an opportunity for the community and for the public to make submissions. So I will reluctantly support this today, because I do think that LTP is the time to have a much greater deep dive into it. I do hope that we can put out clear, concise information that helps the community be able to make submissions, and that the community boards can be much more engaged around what the different projects are within their ward. Finally, I just touch on the fees and charges. You know, I just can't see any sense in us raising car parking fees on street. I just think it just makes no sense at all. I think last time we did that, what we saw was actually people don't put in any more money because there's a level to which people think's reasonable. And so what you end up having is people not putting the extra money in, so we don't get any more revenue, but we just annoy people. We want people coming into our central city, and now's not the time to be raising those charges. Thank you.
Jimmy.
Thank you. Yeah. And I'm happy to adopt the draft annual plan 2020-21, which including all the relevant documents for public consultation today, because in considering this draft annual plan is based on the review and amendment from the third year of the long-term plan 2018-28, like the mayor you mentioned earlier, and set out what the council plans to achieve over next year and how it intends to pay for it. So particularly, we are all aware of this draft annual plan. So if adopted by the council today, it will go out for public consultation at the beginning of March for close about a month. So give the public, those community group, business group, as well as individuals, opportunity feedback to us. I think that's most important. And also, my view, that's still reasonable because the staff review some of the, those feedback from the public due to our annual basis survey, and also consider our current situation. For instance, like the long-term plan, the rates increased 5%, but now we still, consider whether can minimize those rates, the percentage for 4.65. This one, but community individuals still have opportunity feedback to us. And also the overall view, I remember the incoming council particularly, emphasize all the strategic, the kind of framework, like the mayor mentioned earlier. We focus on from original 6, focus on the 4, enabling community, climate change, safety, sustainability, water supply, accelerating the momentum in the city. Particularly, I would like to take example, enabling community. I review those draft, the plan. I'm quite happy, this council fulfill our responsibility, like the Hornby, the new library in Southwest area center. We put on the budget to support this adopt, particularly for a couple of years ago, and also multicultural center. We put on the $1.5 million on those annual plan. If we are not put on the budget on that, how do we to promise to the community, to the people? That's kind of the terrible, ridiculous. So overall, I support this draft annual plan, and also all the relevant document to the public consultation, waiting for the public individual feedback to us. Then we might have the time to discussion for the further debate about this matter. Thank you.
James?
I won't spend a lot of time on the minutiae of the draft plan that I disagree with, but it's largely the capital program phasing, operational costs that I would personally prefer to see go further, and levels of service targets that I don't think are actually, like Melanie's raised, don't appear to be stretch targets. There's also a significant portion of the proposed fees and charges that I disagree with. My own preference is probably a more user pays approach, and I do entirely disagree with the proposal to increase on-street parking charges. Look, although we've heard that it hasn't been increased since 2012, we didn't have a city in 2011, and we've got a lower central city population than what we had in 2010. And also, one of the most common themes that you'll read in every independent report that's commissioned on the barriers to the central city, availability and parking, availability and cost of parking, rightly or wrongly, is consistently listed as one of those barriers. So to increase the charges there, I just think is completely nonsensical when you couple that with a central city action plan, which we have endorsed, which identifies initiatives around making parking cheaper in the central city, and to then raise it, or propose raising it in the annual plan, is a complete demonstration of not listening to the community and ensuring that the left hand doesn't talk to the right hand inside the organisation when you have a plan or budget and a strategy that says two different things. There's also a significant portion of the rates burden that falls on the rural and commercial sector, and the commercial rating differential is probably something that needs to be addressed and hasn't. You don't need to look too far to see the challenging commercial environment that we're in. open the paper any given day of the week and you'll see businesses, largely central city ones, that are going under. That's not the landlords that pay the rates. That's OPEX for the small business that has to wear that. So, I think that is concerning. For me, I guess I've been in this position before where I haven't been overly happy with a draft annual plan, but I've said that it's a start point and the beginning of a conversation with the community, and it's an opportunity for them to tell us what they think and where their priorities are. So that's entirely true. I still believe that to this day, but what's also true, and what experience tells me, is that we don't get inundated with people telling us what to cut. They'll come in and tell us where the resources need to go and how a lot more money needs to be spent in various areas, and they'll make very compelling cases that are hard to disagree with. So my strong preference would have been to flip it on its head, really, and to set a bottom line, as has been alluded to earlier from a number of other members, with where we see the average rates rise being lower than what we have, and work backwards from there. So I think a healthy tension can exist in the organisation to do that. And honestly, I don't think it's gone far enough, so I won't support it today.
Mike?
Kia ora. I will be supporting this consultation with the public on the draft annual plan. It surprises me that there are councillors around here that aren't going to support going out to have a conversation with the people of Christchurch. I think we're just going to be a little bit careful that we don't actually create a negative narrative when we continually go on about the rates increases and don't mention actually all the services that we get in the facilities that we're building. The reality is we're still recovering and rebuilding from the earthquakes, and a lot of the impact from the rates is caused by the Metro Sports facility and the multi-use arena that actually will be important assets for this city when they are completed. When you look at some of the external influences that's actually impacted this annual plan, that was going to add 3%. So in reality, we were starting at 8%. So to get it down below 5% is actually a really good achievement. But when we look at residential homes, and one of the things we always talk about is people that struggle on fixed incomes, it's sitting at 2.74%. And actually when you break that down, that's less than $1.50 a week. And when we hear about people at the top end of the scale, someone that has a $3 million home is only going to be paying an extra $7.30 a week. I'm pretty sure if you can own a $3 million home, you can afford that little amount each week for actually the services that the council provides. At the lower end of the scale, $200,000 home, it's an extra 74 cents a week. So actually, I think we are getting the balance right. Last term, the council, I think, sort of set that LTP, making sure that the rates increases were going to trend down. And it was very clear that the second half of that 10-year, they were actually getting quite low, and this has been reinforced by this new council. I think this annual plan is always a difficult one, just due to the fact that obviously we're a new council that's just got together, so it's never that easy. Obviously with the LTP, that's our chance to really dive deep into all our levels of services, the capital projects, and try and get to the rates increase that we actually want to set for the next 10 years, and I think that's going to be a very good conversation. And we may get surprised from what we hear from the people, right? At the moment, we know there's a climate and ecological emergency, and we're just got to be very careful of actually where we spend our money to make sure we actually achieve good results for the city, but not just now, but into the future. When we criticise increasing car parking, we know that our public transport is failing, and one of the best ways to actually fix public transport is actually to lift car parking prices. So we've just got to be a little bit careful when we criticise one thing, the impact of actually not doing it achieves. So I will be supporting this draft.
Thank you. Andrew.
Much of this debate today is about finding the balance between rates increases, revenue and resourcing with levels of service and the delivery of the capital programme. And yes, it would be great to have much smaller rates increases, and I fully expect that over time we will achieve that. But it would not be so great to be making slash and burn cuts to projects and services which our communities actually expect us to deliver in order to meet an arbitrary or an unsustainable rates target. Of course, I want lower rates increases, but I also want a community that's happy with what the council delivers. There was some discussion last year about zero rates increases, and clearly some discussion today about setting rates targets. Whilst that might have some immediate appeal, the result would also need to be massive cuts to services and projects, and a problem for future councils and in fact to the community due to this deliberate underinvestment. And whilst I want to reduce rates increases as far as possible, as soon as possible, I cannot support a damaging, arbitrary slash and burn approach. We need to keep the momentum in the city. I'm not prepared to see the city's investment in regeneration, in development, in vibrancy and innovation stalled because of a planned lack of investment at this particularly critical time. Yes, I want lower rates increases, but I want us to achieve this sustainably, intelligently and strategically. So it's particularly unfortunate, it's particularly frustrating that some people are intending voting against this today, given that we've worked on the development of this plan together and with staff as a group. There's been plenty of opportunity before now for councillors to suggest further reductions in rates, which of course would need to be supported by reductions in expenses, meaning reduced levels of service or deferred or cancelled project delivery. If there really is disagreement with what we've got here, if people really think we've not gone far enough, that should have been articulated well before now, along with alternative proposals, before getting to the approval of this draft for consultation today. And I wish those alternatives had been raised, but I haven't heard them. So to vote against approval today is also to vote against the community being able to have their say on the draft. I'll be supporting this today, because in doing so, I'll be supporting and encouraging the community's absolute right to have their say. And I'll be listening to what the community say, and I'll be responding to what we hear, totally open to making changes, as I'm sure we all are, so that we can achieve a final annual plan that gets the balance right and that really articulates the expectations of our community, at the same time showing as much fiscal restraint as we possibly can, with reductions in rates increases as far as possible, as soon as possible, but in a sustainable way.
Thank you. Just to wrap up the debate, you know, this is an opportunity for us to have this debate, and it's good that people have entered into it in the way that they have, but I want to kind of reinforce, that's a $5 fine, Andrew, that I want to reinforce, actually that hasn't had a rate of inflation inspired increase for quite some time. I think
that's my very first one in 650.
Right, it's a $50 fine for you. Anyway, what I haven't focused on, and I did initially cover it, and I want to just re-emphasise it. And that is the significant additional costs that were not in front of the council when we considered the long-term plan. So it's all very well to say that you weren't here when the long-term plan was considered, but actually, even if you were here, you wouldn't have known about these three things. You wouldn't have known that we would have to put $5 million on budget for Eco Central recycling annual processing fee. You wouldn't know that we had to set aside $5.6 million, essentially a contingency, for the Holidays Act 2003. I don't agree with the changes that were made to the law. The law has become incredibly complex, but it is what it is. MB have an interpretation of the Act, and every big company in the country is doing this. They're actually seeing that there is a price involved with fixing retrospectively the Holidays Act, especially for those industries that operate 24/7. And we are one of those industries that operate 24/7 in many instances. $5 million increase on budget for council's rates as a result of our infrastructure revaluation. We pay rates on our infrastructure that's under the ground. We've improved our infrastructure under the ground and we've revaluated it, and we've done that for a whole lot of purposes, including insurance, and we pay the price for it. But who pays the price for it? Our ratepayers. I'd like to see the law change, the legal framework that has caused this. It's disappointing, you know. So, look, I honestly think that that was a 3% increase in our rates that we didn't know about when we set the third year of this plan. So let's go out for consideration. Let's hear feedback. I agree with those who've said that we're going to hear from people who want more and who want to increase, well, they won't put it that way, but they'll ask for more. But let's do that in a context of we have put out a constrained budget, and it's going to get better. So, and when I say better, we are, and I just want to say this. I'm expressing 100% confidence in our new Chief Executive to do her the job that we brought her on to do. And we have asked her to focus on the organisation and to do so in a way that calls upon all of her experience. And I'm confident that she is going to deliver. The big changes will be made in the LTP, but I don't think the changes are over for this annual plan yet either. So on that note, I shall put motion number 1. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. So do you want to just put up your hand for no? So that's James, Catherine, Sam, Phil and Aaron. And so that's carried. And I'll put the motion for number 2, a noting provision. Oh yes, and Yanni against proposed fees and charges.
Thank you.
And so I'll put number 2. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. So that's the noting requirement. So the same people? Oh, just the same people. Number 3, note the recommendations of the Audit and Risk Committee. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Number 4, authorises the General Manager, etc. to make non-material changes, etc., including updating things for when the Crown recovery timing comes through. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Adopts for public consultation, the consultation document. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The same group says no to the consultation document. Number 6 is the public notification. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. So no public notification. That's carried. And just the same people. And then all submissions will be considered by the council before it meets on the 23rd of June to adopt the annual plan. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. So that is the end of the resolutions. Or no, is it? Yes. Yes. And I can declare the meeting closed. So I'll declare the meeting closed, except that I will invite James, if you would close the meeting. Thank you.
Mutunga, mo te hui, te tapu o tātou kōrero ka whakahokia ki te whare. Hui e tahi ki e.
Kia ora. Thank you. Thanks very